So I wanted to project into Mark Hofmann this kind of guy who had, who had been disillusioned and hurt. And so his motives were understandable, and then who just took it too far. And then it just got out of control like a bad Ponzi scheme. And then it blew up and he became a murderer. But from all the people I've talked to, including Sandra Tanner and others, it's probably that narrative is probably not going to fly. So do you guys want to talk about his early years and his motives as much or as little as you want? Because that's interesting to me.
Mm-hmm. I'm speculating here, but I think I may have entered more of his mind than anyone. And I've spent 4 years researching Mark, and I have accumulated so much of his materials, his mission journal, his childhood journal, his letters he wrote, everything. I've talked to every single person I could who's involved in it. So, I mean, I know this dude well, I'd like to think. And of course, nobody knows Mark Hofmann well. And one of his letters I remember reading that he wrote to his wife said, everyone thinks they know me, but nobody knows me but me, as I always say. So Mark has his own secrets and his own motivations, and nobody will ultimately know that. But as far as Mark's childhood and going back, we cover a bit of it in the film, but I think Mark, first and foremost, I think he's brilliant. I think he's incredibly intelligent and driven to be intelligent. So he was curious, very curious individual who, like a lot of boys growing up in small towns in Utah, they did stupid shit. Like they'd blow up mailboxes, and he'd, mess around with cats, which is actually an unfortunate thing that we left out, that he was kind of interested in hurting cats.
Like Dahmer.
A bit like Dahmer. But without all the soy sauce added in it, I guess, if that Dahmer used.
Dark.
But I think Mark just had this need to deceive and was very good at it. And I think initially one of the things that Mark was interested in as a child was magic tricks. And he loved doing magic. He loved deceiving. And I even one of his letters, he says that. I loved deceiving people with magic and the power that had. But one thing, and I know a bit about magicians, I did a documentary about magic, is that one thing I revere about magicians is the ability to keep the secret, not just to do the bloody trick, but to say, I'm not going to tell you how I did it. And that power that Mark probably felt as a child. When he forged the mint mark on a coin at the age of 14 and sent it into the U.S. Treasury, I think that imagine, I remember being a kid, changing my report card and fooling my mom. Secret's out, Mom. I like, you felt a little something like I did it. I pulled that off. I can't believe I pulled that off. And they believed it. An adult believed that. He sent the coin into the U.S. Treasury, and they sent him a letter saying that it's real. He took that coin into a dealer, and they said it's real. And he sold it for a great deal of money. Like, the power that he must have felt, and knowing that he can't tell. Now I can't tell people that because I just sold this coin for thousands of dollars and I don't have the money to take it back. That must have been like intoxicating for this young man. So that, I think, set him on this course of, I can get away with anything if I just tell people that it's true.
Power tripping.
But so yes, all that, but I do believe that motives are usually multifaceted. Mm-hmm. And there is no question that he had been studying church history very early on, that he had lost his faith, and that he was angry at the brethren on some level and wanted to kind of get back at them and embarrass them. And that shows that somehow some of this stuff factored in, no?
One of the people that we interview in the film is Tyler's cousin, Ron Measom, who was his buddy in college up at Utah State before his mission and after his mission. And it actually gone to Hoffman's mission farewell and everything.
Yeah, he said the prayer. Hoffmann said the prayer at his mission farewell.
It runs.
Yeah, and it's interesting because of all the books I've read and all the things I read, nobody ever talked to him. And he was, for the most part, Mark's only friend in college. So.
And it's wild, but Hoffmann would go to Tyler's cousin's family's home and talk about all, as he was learning about, I guess, the skeletons in the closet of church history and just the contradictions and some of the more depressing stuff, you could see him kind of testing the waters with faithful members to see, kind of what would spark their worry or what would evoke a real emotional response. And it was fascinating hearing Tyler's cousin talk about that kind of stuff, because it was a little window into his state of mind leading up to the Anthon transcript discovery, because that was all at Utah State. He just gotten married to Dory. He was studying chemistry. He was pre-med up there. And then obviously once he hit this home run and came into some money with the Anthon transcript, it's like, I'm going to do this full time.
Yeah.
But it was interesting, as far as like him, he said he became an atheist at a very young age, and that's something documented that he confesses to. But it was interesting when we were in Connecticut, I think, and I can't remember who. One of the experts on Hofmann has quite a collection of actual Hofmann stuff, and he had
John Resnikoff.
He had Hofmann's high school chemistry book, and in like Hofmann's weird little chicken scratch, and has horrible penmanship, and he doesn't spell very well either. But he'd drawn a picture, like a stick figure of Jesus getting hung, and it said, "Why was Jesus crucified and not hung?" And it was like,
but he spelled hung wrong.
He spelled it H-U-N-D, and then crucified like with an S. And it was like, who's thinking about this disturbing crap? Like in high school, like why was he killed this way instead of this way? And it was such like, wow, this is the kind of stuff he was thinking about and talking. And he could have just been goofing off too, right? But it was like a little weird nugget.
My cousin Ron, and he told some stories. One of them was that, and these unfortunately, we tried to put them in the film and just couldn't. There was no place for it. He said that when he went to his dorm in college, Mark once pulled out a shoebox from under the bed, and it was full of writing instruments and pens and inks. And he'd opened up a notebook, and he had practiced like a bunch of signatures and handwriting. And he said Mark told him, I'm practicing signatures. And in there was George Washington and Joseph Smith. And this was him like kind of revealing that he was doing this, early. And that's the first time I've ever heard that. There was a story in the film that we tried like hell to put in, and it was when everyone was at a restaurant in Boston, and Dory was there, and I think Shannon Flynn was there, and Brent Metcalf, I believe, was there. I can't remember, but they'd gone to some book fair, and they were sitting at a table, and the table was paper, and there were crayons or pens, and everyone was like doodling, and Mark just popped off this amazing George Washington signature. And then he popped off a Joseph Smith, and then he popped off a Mark Twain. And just one after another, he just, strung these signatures together exact. And everyone was kind of amazed that he could do that. And of course he goes, it's just something I do. And this was,
what?
Yeah, I know. And nobody, it never registered 2 + 2 that, he just... Yeah. Forged a George Washington signature, and 3 months later he found a George Washington letter,
And nobody was even in the headspace of forgery at that time, though. I mean, this is like in the mid 80s, leading up to the bombing. So people just thought, oh yeah, he's seen a bunch of them. Oh, he can bang them out. That's cool. But in hindsight, people are like, holy dang.
Yeah. Nobody mentioned forgery. The funny thing is everyone says, oh, well, how come so many people were able to, no, and he fooled so many people. But Mark was, he was a brilliant forger, and we can go into that later. He was really, really good at it. B, he would never just find the documents himself. A lot of times he'd have Lynn Jacobs, an associate, find it, or Shannon Flynn would, quote unquote, find it. So he'd give it to Shannon and say, Shannon, go sell this. Or C, he was the only one who was doing this. D. Michael Quinn was like, I asked him, I was like, why did no one question? He goes, look, he was the only guy whose full-time job was to find documents, and that's it. And so, of course, he would uncover certain things. But nobody ever thought forgery. Nobody. And I know people say, oh, Gerald Tanner did. And Gerald Tanner did to some aspects. Gerald Tanner believed that the Salamander letter was a forgery. And that's because it was closely akin to Mormonism Unveiled, which he said is too similar. However, he never said to Mark it's a forgery.
He said it in a newsletter that Sanders shopped around.
He never said Mark forged it. He said it was forged.
Forgery of the time.
One incident, the only incident I've heard of is Mark presented Brent Ashworth with some hole in the wall photos, Butch Cassidy, and there were photos, and on the back it was like listed, the Butch Cassidy or whomever it was, and these were photos that were sent out to sheriffs in the Old West, like wanted cards, if you will. And he presented them to Brent, and he goes, "These are forgeries." And Mark was, "Well, okay, I must have bought them as a forgery. I'll take them back." So that's the only time that I've heard that anyone called out Mark Hofmann as a forgery. And then he just passed it off. "Oh, I must have bought them as forgers." So nobody suspected. And that includes everyone from the FBI to Sotheby's to every renowned document examiner prior to him being bombed or bombing.
Right.
Spoiler alert.
There's bombings?
Episode 2.
Well, when I think about like Magneto of the X-Men, I think about like a broken, devious, murderer with a cause. Mm-hmm. And I do feel like Hoffman had motive. Oh, yeah. Right?
Sure. Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. I mean, if you ask him, it's money. And he'll say it was money. I don't think that's necessarily true, but.
Yeah, no, I mean, in his confession transcript, he's like, "Well, I didn't want to take down the church." Well, let me take that back. Maybe I did. or not take down the church, but rewrite history or change history. And he totally did, because he knew the history. He knew how fun it would be. I mean, again, it was like he was just power tripping. He loved the feeling he had by pulling one over on people and to be able to rewrite history. It's like there are documents that have been quoted in modern history books, like in the 2000s, that later in their second edition, they have had to go back and go, "Oops, we just found out this is a Hoffman turd. So we were wrong about," you know what I mean? Like that's happened on a number of occasions. So yeah, they're still out there, man.